The war had ended 3 cycles ago, but the scars remained fresh across the galaxy. Humanity had done the impossible. They had forced the Dravakian Empire to the negotiation table. Not through superior firepower, though their weaponry had proven surprisingly effective. Not through cunning diplomacy, though their ambassadors were frustratingly persistent. No, humanity had won because they simply refused to surrender, even when every logical species would have accepted extinction as inevitable. Emperor Draveth stood at the observation deck of the newly established embassy station, his massive form barely fitting within the reinforced chamber. His scales, dark as the void between stars, shimmered with an inner fire that betrayed his ancient lineage. Dragons didn't age like other species. They accumulated time like precious stones, each century adding weight to their presence, gravity to their mere existence. He had ruled for 17 centuries. He had conquered 12 star systems. He had never bowed to any creature, mortal or divine. The humans had insisted on this cultural exchange as part of the peace accords. Draveth had considered it an insult at first, this demand that he personally witness their family units and civilian life. What did warriors need with such weakness? But the human negotiators had been adamant, and even in victory the Dravakian military command had urged caution. Humanity was too unpredictable, too volatile to provoke further, so here he stood, watching through crystal steel windows as human families arrived for the embassy's inauguration ceremony. "Your Eminence," his aide whispered, "the Ambassador Chen requests your presence in the reception hall." Draveth's tail swept in irritation, scorching a mark across the polished floor. "These formalities are beneath me." "Perhaps. But the treaty requires—" "I know what the treaty requires." Draveth's voice rumbled like a collapsing star. "I wrote half the clauses myself." The reception hall was chaos incarnate. Humans milled about with their characteristic disorder. No proper hierarchies, no ritual spacing, no respect for rank evident in their casual movements. They laughed. They touched each other without permission. They made noise for the apparent pleasure of making noise. Draveth towered above them all, a mountain of ancient power among insects. Most humans gave him wide berth, their survival instincts finally functioning properly. He appreciated that at least. Then he saw her. A tiny human, barely reaching the height of his lowest claw, was marching directly toward him. She wore some ridiculous human garment, bright yellow with incomprehensible symbols, and her hair stuck out in directions that defied gravitational laws. She couldn't have seen more than 3 solar cycles. "Mira! Mira, come back here!" A human female, presumably the mother, was scrambling after the child, panic evident in her elevated voice. But Mira Lennox had already committed to her trajectory. She stopped directly before Draveth, tilted her head back at an angle that should have hurt her neck, and stared up at him with eyes the color of Earth's oceans. Draveth stared back, uncertain for the first time in decades. What was the protocol here? He could incinerate this creature with a breath. He could crush it with a careless step. The child raised one impossibly small hand. "Big," she announced, as if this was a revelation that needed sharing. Draveth's secondary minds, the ones that handled tactical analysis and threat assessment, scrambled for appropriate responses. This was clearly some sort of challenge, or perhaps a test. Humans were known for their psychological warfare. Then Mira Lennox did something that no being had done in 700 years. She touched him. Her tiny fingers, each no larger than his smallest tooth, pressed against the scales of his foreleg. She patted him, the way one might pat a domestic creature. The touch was soft, warm, utterly without fear or calculation. "Nice dragon," she said solemnly. The reception hall had gone silent. Every human held their breath. Every Dravakian guard reached for their weapons. Ambassador Chen looked as if he might faint. Draveth's first instinct was rage. How dare this larva presume physical contact with his divine form? His second instinct was confusion. Why wasn't she afraid? His third instinct, the one that surprised him most, was something he hadn't felt since his own hatchling days, before power and pride had calcified around his hearts. Curiosity. He lowered his massive head, bringing his eyes level with hers. Up close, he could see that her hair wasn't defying gravity. It was simply growing in all directions with enthusiastic disorganization. Her skin was impossibly smooth, unmarred by battle or time, and her eyes held no malice, no calculation, no agenda, She was simply looking at him. "You're very small," Draveth observed, his voice modulated to avoid shattering her fragile eardrums. Mira considered this. "You're very big." "Yes, can I touch your nose?" Every tactical protocol in Draveth's considerable arsenal screamed warnings. The nose was vulnerable. The nose was intimate. The nose was... He lowered his head further. Mira reached up with both hands and placed them on his snout just above his nostrils. Her touch was gentle, exploratory. She giggled, a sound like water over stones. "Warm," she announced. Then with complete trust she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his scales. Something shattered inside Draveth. Not his body. His bodies had endured plasma fire and singularity weapons. Not his mind. His minds had navigated diplomatic labyrinths and military campaigns across galaxies. Something deeper broke. Something he'd thought long dead. His pride. His certainty. His belief that power and dominance were the only truths that mattered. This child, who knew nothing of his titles or conquests, who couldn't even pronounce Dravakian properly, had treated him with simple kindness. Not reverence. Not fear. Just kindness. Emperor Draveth, who had accepted the surrender of 100 worlds, who had never bowed his head to any authority, slowly lowered himself to the ground. His massive form folded, his wings tucked until his eyes were level with little Mira Lennox. "You honor me, small one," he whispered. The child beamed and patted his nose again. "Nice dragon." Ambassador Chen finally found his voice. "Your Eminence, I apologize, she didn't mean—" Silence. Draveth's gaze never left Mira. "I am learning something important." "Learning what, my lord?" Draveth watched as Mira's mother finally reached her daughter, relief and terror warring on her face. But Mira simply turned and waved goodbye, already distracted by something else across the hall. "I am learning," Draveth said slowly, "why we could never truly defeat humanity. They send their warriors to fight with the fierceness of cornered beasts, but they also send their children to touch dragons without fear. They carry both sword and trust in the same hands. How does one conquer that?" He rose to his full height once more, but something had changed. The weight of centuries felt different now, less like armor, more like chains he could choose to remove. Emperor Draveth had knelt for the first time in 700 years, and somehow impossibly it had felt like rising.